water, not have electricity, not have security, not have so many things on the hospital. We are broke down. The Venezuela right now is broke down. Oh yes, very angry, very angry.
La realidad es que la gente se está muriendo.
Yo dije que no, que yo tenía que irme porque tenía que irme. Y como él tomó la iniciativa, yo decidí salir con él.
Sí, o sea, asustado, que igual tiene fiebre y diarrea, el otro bebé también está enfermo. Pero así vamos a ver cómo nos va por allá. Porque ya estamos en Venezuela.
Dale, buenas tardes, dale.
Aquí, ponte aquí al lado de...
¿Qué te ha gustado? Porque nosotros teníamos una sola cobija para arroparnos todos. Una sola cobija para arroparnos todos y poníamos cartones en el piso para dormir.
Some borders are built to keep us out. Others are meant to squeeze people in. Still more are made to mark possessions. Yet the biggest borders don't run between countries or categories. They're the lines we draw within ourselves that must be crossed in order to help those most in need. These are the borders that unite us or divide us, that define our common ground when the call to action comes. They measure how far we would go to be part of the solution when most of the world looks the other way. Doctors, lawyers, mothers. A tragic turn can happen on any road.
Daña la ropa, la engorda. Cuando tiene zapato alto, cuando tiene zapato chola, tiene zapato de goma. Son muchos cambios drásticos.
And yet, in a time where it has never become easier to connect and empower us to take a stand, some of the largest tragedies today are being swept into the shadows. Is it simply another wrong turn on the path to progress? Or is it that the more we are able to watch and don't speak up, we build new borders of our own? Ones that become more difficult to cross. Nowhere is this more evident than in Venezuela right now. The outcome is as shattering as any war. For the first time in history, asylum claims from Venezuelans were higher than anywhere in the world last year. More than 1 in 5 refugees seeking asylum worldwide. Nearly 5 million Venezuelans have fled their country in panic. Families faced with constant shortages of medicine and food, and worse. Lifetime savings evaporate overnight from hyperinflation. Power outages, violence, and human trafficking have all become widespread. Yet there is no civil war to show the world, no bombs to capture by camera.
Yes, gasoline shortages in Venezuela are frankly making a very difficult situation. People that simply have to queue for hours and perhaps days in order to simply fill up their tank.
A collapse in the shadows can hide the true depth of devastation. But for how long? Yet there is a small thread of hope that runs through this crisis. While most countries around the world are closing their borders, Colombia and other nearby countries are opening their homes and their hearts, greeting Venezuelan refugees as though this is a shared tragedy. For many who seek asylum, this solidarity is all they have to lean on. Truly, to some, the only difference between a stranger and a neighbor is a helping hand in a time of need. But these neighbors have nowhere near the resources to accommodate swelling numbers and the needs of a crisis of this magnitude. And the entire region is on the brink. So what happens to borders when the unimaginable stretches to become the new normal? When tragedy grows in shadows and can take so many shapes. A tragedy must always be given a face and a voice. And it is when we see ourselves in these faces and hear ourselves in these voices that we remember a border never runs only one way. It is hard now to imagine that not long ago, Venezuela was the richest country in South America. It had the largest proven oil reserves of any country in the world, rich enough that Venezuela welcomed many Colombians fleeing from their own conflict several decades ago.
Venezuela es un país que recibió en sus mejores épocas a miles, a millones de colombianos, me incluyo yo, y yo doy fe de eso, que fueron bien recibidos y que hoy en día tienen sus casas, tuvieron sus negocios.
But with shortages in every sector, skyrocketing costs of basic supplies, dwindling access to clean water, and frequent electricity blackouts, more than 15% of Venezuelans have fled their home country since 2015. The effects across the continent have been devastating. Venezuela shares 2,200 kilometers of border with Colombia, and though there are 7 formal border crossings between two countries, there is no possible way to keep track of the thousands of other routes that Venezuelans are using to flee their country. Jungles, rivers, gang-riddled underpasses. The dangers grow every day. Many refugees are absorbed directly by Colombia. But the sheer amount of the roughly 5,000 people that leave Venezuela daily have overflowed into Ecuador, Peru, and well beyond. The majority are at extremely high risk during their journey to seek asylum. Some walk back the same day to bring basic supplies lacking in their hometowns. But mostly Venezuela with small suitcases that contain the only parts of their lives they were able to hold on to.
No nos vamos porque queremos del país. Nos vamos porque necesitamos, estamos buscando una mejor vida para nosotros y para nuestros familiares allá en Venezuela.
If there is a window to leave, asylum seekers must seek it, even if that means separating from family. Violence, soaring food costs, desperate searches for medical care. The causes to flee are as urgent as they are unexpected to a population that just a few years ago had a strong quality of life. Many Venezuelans are highly skilled professionals, able to contribute to any economy. Now at their local grocery store, a day's supply of food might cost a month's salary.
Sería algo distinto, sería bueno y cónchale, porque aquí uno tiene sus 3 comidas, uno come. No sabemos qué comen ellos allá. Allá no es fácil, allá las personas dicen, no, pero trabajan, pero tienen... Allá ni que tú tengas 5 trabajos comes.
With few ways to make ends meet in their country now, how are they leaving? Any way they can. There is never a clean break. Always pieces left behind. Hope that there is still a chance to return to life as it once was. The numbers are stacked against them, as the refugees spend 17 years of life in exile on average. That's 17 years in limbo, unable to go home or move on with life. But here, in Latin America, where the tides can turn so fast, families are now scattered across the continent in search of hope. This fracturing of the family has created a dependency between home country and host country. With relatives still stuck in Venezuela, many refugees send money home to their brothers, daughters, and mothers so they can afford food or travel fare to join them in Colombia or wherever they have found safety. The border here stretches well past country lines, following the hearts of loved ones who can't let go. It is impossible to walk without looking back when part of your family is left behind. But Los Caminantes, or walkers, as they are now becoming known, represent a growing number of the most vulnerable fleeing Venezuela. The first step is getting out. their journey is extremely dangerous, and there is a high risk of detention and deportation along the way due to lack of documentation. Worse, young asylum seekers find themselves easy prey to smugglers and traffickers. Some go into massive debt to those who have helped lead them through the informal crossings. But once across, most walkers lack even basic information about the harsh realities of the journey ahead, wherever it may take them. In busy Colombian border towns like Riohacha, UNHCR has set up orientation and attention points to help brief fleeing Venezuelans on their access to rights. These points are critical to identify, track, and document many who do not know where to find basic supplies or public services and risk falling prey to immediate dangers on the streets. Some asylum seekers, like this young man Nelson, are able to use these resources to find their way to the nearby Centro ACNUR, a facility supported by UNHCR. Here, Venezuelan refugees and Colombian returnees seek shelter and assistance as they wait for news from their families. Most importantly, safe spaces like Centro ACNUR or facilities supported by UNHCR grant a temporary break from the storm outside the gates.
Yo duré 2 meses cruzando 4 países, Colombia, Ecuador, Perú y Chile. Cuando llego a Chile me robaron y tuve que regresarme a Perú. Me regresé de nuevo a Perú, ahí estuve como unos 15 días, 17 días, más o menos.
Nelson has walked hundreds of kilometers in just a few months to try to reunite with his family. While he may appear healthy, young men like Nelson have increasingly become one of the most high-risk groups vulnerable to kidnapping and trafficking common at the border. Many like him who flee get robbed along the way, their passports stolen, or paperwork long since expired, leaving no official way to get to the next destination. His voyage to 4 neighboring countries is astonishing, but he's not alone.
Son cosas que uno vive con miedo, uno ni descansa. Llego todavía, es el son de hoy en día que todavía yo no duermo bien, yo me despierto 4 o 5 veces a la madrugada, que me quedó la secuela de que yo me tenía que despertar.
Too many like him cannot afford any better solution than to take shelter in the streets until an opportunity presents itself.
Este es nuestro trabajo. Nosotros hacemos pájaros con llantas, hacemos sillas. Esto es con una llanta pequeña de moto. Se hacen 3 rayas, se dobla y se saca el pico.
He's thankful, but he knows there is a long way to go. Nelson has yet to meet his daughter, who was just born in Venezuela. His wife must wait for him to give word that there is a safe place to meet before she leaves. For asylum seekers like Nelson, the most valuable resource at the border crossing isn't cash or even a warm meal. It is information, and it is in short supply. Few of the most vulnerable are aware that only one day into walking on the most common route to Colombia's capital, Bogota, the geography shifts from warm weather into mountain terrain, where the temperature drops cold enough to freeze at night. With robbery so common, most arrive with little more than shirts on their backs.
Llegamos a terminar. Entonces se nos acerca unas personas, dicen que vamos por el puente donde nos van a... Entonces cuando vamos nos dicen que si no tenemos el permiso nos quitan los bebés, entonces nosotros preferimos poder irnos por debajo. Entonces abajo nos agarraron un grupo y dicen, no, que yo las paso. Y en eso nos robaron todo, ahí se fue pañal, ahí se fue todo. No tenemos nada. En el momento de llegar, y así cruzamos, porque no nos vamos a devolver igual. Venimos de caminamos todos los patios, hemos caminado bastante, creo que vamos a ir caminando y haciendo paradas.
Weather is the least of their concerns. Sometimes this bus stop, just a few miles from the border, can host hundreds of people on any given afternoon. While they wait for the sun to weaken, many search for signs how to get to their next stop. Sometimes signs are all they have. asylum seekers push on in the hopes that relatives who fled deeper into Colombia or beyond have work opportunities to make the trek worthwhile. Many of them won't know until they get there, and the transit rules often change overnight. Without the latest papers, many become stranded by other borders and are forced to circle back towards Venezuela in an endless loop. Those healthy enough to carry on the journey consider themselves the lucky ones. Many cross the border without even the luxury of a plan. With such a high volume of walkers making their way across the border, identifying high-risk groups of the most vulnerable have become an urgent priority. At the Paraguayan Bridge, connecting the north of Venezuela to Colombia, UNHCR has the only information center to try to reach those most in need. Chaos, misinformation, desperation. These are the common signs of a border stretched to its limits. Young families, as well as young women who are most vulnerable to trafficking, are identified as high-risk priorities. Many have crossed simply to find meals or medicine for their children, and without access to information, are quickly forced to take the streets. In response to the growing number of high-risk refugees, UNHCR has created an integrated assistance center in Maicao, the first of its kind in Colombia. Here, some of the most vulnerable refugees receive protection, registration, medical attention, and specialized support. Most are taken in after months on the street. Pregnant women, young families, the list keeps growing. No description can give justice to the true depth of their suffering. Of how quickly lives all too familiar to our own were pulled out from under them. Those chosen are identified the night before, often deep in homeless areas with no access to local authorities or public services. The next morning, they are formally registered. Inside the UNHCR center, they are given a month of safety. For those who do get registered, it is often the first time in months since leaving Venezuela they get access to clean drinking water, warm meals, and safe spaces. From registration, they are taken to a medical station for vaccinations and medical checkups. For many, proof of these vaccinations is essential to travel through Colombia or to join their relatives in other countries. It is so common for documents to be stolen that these papers can often mean the difference between life and death for Venezuelans. Gangs, traffickers, storms. This young family has spent months on the streets sleeping with one eye open.
Bueno, tenemos aproximadamente más de una semana que no dormimos por la lluvia, por la situación de calle. Estamos desesperados, o sea, cuando llegaron los tipos comprando órganos, mi esposo no pudo dormir, nos turnábamos, los hombres se turnaban. Bueno, ¿qué pasó en la calle? Llegaron unos motorizados comprando órganos de niños, que si nosotros nos vendíamos los niños para sacarle los órganos, corazón, hígado, riñones y todo eso. Los ojos. Ojos, todo. Entonces nosotros nos traumatizamos y yo agarré a mis niños, los abrazaba, nosotros estábamos tirados en el piso, los abrazaba, pedíamos ayuda, pasaba la policía, pero no, teníamos que quedarnos ahí, afuera de la calle. O sea, como que me ha tocado pedir con ellos, me ha humillado, me ha tocado pedir, me ha tocado comer sobras de comida. No me ha tocado todavía comer de la calle, pero cuando estoy en una parte, o sea, que dejan sobras. Mis hijos se han acostado sin comer en la noche.
From steady jobs in Venezuela to scrounging for leftovers in dumpsters, their road to survival came with no warning signs. Now, even seeing more than one mattress is a blessing. Here they finally have a chance to focus on solutions beyond the hours ahead. For some children like Natalia, this is the first time she is able to use soap in weeks. On the streets, she is forced to look after her family too, and it is the first time she can change her younger brother with new diapers rather than newspapers. It is impossible to ignore the courage and the fight in the eyes of these families, that glint of hope from what was lost. These were contributing members of society in Venezuela. and speak of what anyone could want: a better future for their children, a chance to build savings and put their skills to use, a promise of safety. This was a basic reality in Venezuela until it vanished in the blink of an eye.
Bueno, por los momentos, mi futuro, mientras mis hijos estén bien y Colombia me abra las puertas, estaría aquí, pero yo no cambio mi Venezuela. Venezuela, yo quisiera que Venezuela se compusiera para que mis hijos estuvieran allá bien y tuviéramos todo entre familia.
Yet families like those at the center are tragically growing too common to be the exception. The struggle to find even basic food supplies is a daily reality of many asylum seekers trapped in the border towns with no means of providing for their children or themselves. Further down the border, in Cucuta, similar families who haven't eaten meals in days sometimes travel 50 kilometers from Venezuela just for one meal in this communal kitchen supported by UNHCR. Over 8,000 meals a day are served here, often to pregnant mothers who suffer from malnutrition. Every day, the lines grow longer. Warm meals aren't the only thing becoming increasingly scarce in Venezuela. A frightening lack of medical assistance is driving asylum seekers across the border in record numbers. They only know their urgency outweighs their uncertainty.
No tenemos buena alimentación, no nos han visto los médicos como tal, con una CB, y tengo el pie hinchadísimo, y de que me caí, he estado enfermo, nunca me han visto un doctor, nada de eso ya.
Y tengo un material y ese material me está rechazando y no conseguía los antibióticos allá, pues me viene eso.
For Venezuelans like this young woman, her very child's life depended on seeking aid across the border.
Yo me vine de Venezuela porque el niño mío me convulsiona. No, yo duré como un mes arrendada.
Then the unthinkable happened.
Y después yo llegué al hospital y me dijeron que ya no había más tiempo, que el niño no tenía. Me dijeron que fuera el lunes para allá a buscarlo. Y yo vine y me llevé a la niña chiquita. Y cuando fui me dijeron que no, que le dieran a la niña, que yo estaba en situación de calle, que el niño estaba todo sucio, que cuando yo arrendaba y conseguí un trabajo, que ellos me dieran el niño. Pero ¿cómo uno va a trabajar aquí si los colombianos no le dan trabajo ni nada de eso?
Her story rings of constant setbacks, papers stolen at the border, and no clear way to get documentation necessary for the access she needs most, all for her son. In this case, a vicious cycle has led to the ultimate disaster. Forced to sleep on the streets while seeking medicine for her son's seizures, her children were taken away from her as their living conditions were deemed a hazard. Without papers to work, she cannot follow formal procedures that would allow her to regain custody of her children. UNHCR works with governments in the region to address the protection and essential needs of Venezuelans like her in order to keep families of asylum seekers together. In the meantime, all this mother can do is wait for help by the border. Whether traveling as far as the walkers might or stranded as close as his mother, it is clear across this crisis that family and survival are synonyms to Venezuelans. There is not one without the other. But with so many pieces left back home, many fleeing Venezuelans are tied as close as possible to the border. Many who would have otherwise had professional skills to be put to use have found it increasingly difficult as the numbers rise and the restrictions swell. Here in Cucuta, the streets bustle with street vendors and peddlers of all kind, trapped into making a life work within walking distance of loved ones. Like many others, this woman saw her savings in Venezuela crumble overnight.
Estaba trabajando, soy abogado, soy asesor jurídico, trabajo en los tribunales, por la cuestión de que en los tribunales nos sacaron a los privados. Yo vengo de la Rómulo Gallego. Hay pena, hay personas que ya te han visto en Venezuela y ven aquí, mira, de ser abogada a vender café.
Immediately, she fled from a once stable private practice to selling on the street here in order to send money to her relatives just across the border. From owning her own apartment in Venezuela to sleeping on the streets in Colombia, she now lives in a room with 6 strangers, putting her safety at risk each night.
Es fuerte porque el apego a ellos, el apego a tu mamá, a tu papá, el frío de tu pasar en el piso, porque no, yo llamo un refugio donde colchonetas, las colchonetas son así, te enfermas los riñones cuando eres cesárea, que te han sacado esto, cuando has parido, todo eso te cumples a ti la vida.
So while many of the walkers find hope in the family members who have found opportunities before them, others find themselves on the other side of the coin, determined to provide for family that simply cannot make their way out yet. But across the spectrum, no matter the condition or the need of each asylum seeker, a common theme echoes throughout this tragedy: a hunger to contribute. And though they feel they've lost their home country, they haven't lost their appetite to work and to give back.
Nosotros tenemos residenciado aquí en Colombia. Trabajar y ser fuente de producción aquí en Colombia.
This sense of communal duty is everywhere among Venezuelan refugees. And for the countless now who rely on the kindness of strangers, those who manage to land on their feet are certain that this cycle will not stop without becoming part of the solution.
Soy médico general, soy venezolano. Bueno, primeramente que todas estas organizaciones que están prestando apoyo y las que todavía están por dar un paso adelante a todas estas crisis, que no nos dejen solos. Que no nos dejen solos a esta población que cada día, esta población migratoria que cada día va creciendo. Mi país vive un punto muy crítico que no sabemos hasta cuándo va a durar, pero yo solo les pido que realmente sigan apoyando esta causa, que sigan apoyando y que no nos dejen solos, porque es mucha la población que necesita, es muchas necesidades que vivimos nosotros los venezolanos día a día. El simple hecho de salir de nuestro país obligados ya es un sentimiento bastante fuerte.
It takes more than mere virtue on a continent where history has begun to repeat itself to staggering effect. Many right here in Colombia have lived through a version of this nightmare before. And yet when we finally look through the eyes of those who have suffered similar fates just next door, does the first thread of hope emerge. The future can be helped by those who refuse to let the past define the rest of their lives. Nowhere is this more evident than the informal community of Brisas del Norte along the northern coast of Colombia. The settlement was originally formed by Colombian returnees, many of whom have experienced tragedy of their own, all too similar to this one.
Hay que tomar conciencia y eso no debe pasar. Venezuela es un país que recibió en sus mejores épocas a miles, a millones de colombianos. Me incluyo yo, en los años 70, 80, 90, donde no se iban ni 2 ni 3, sino por miles se iban hacia Venezuela. Y yo doy fe de eso, que fueron bien recibidos y que hoy en día tienen sus casas, tuvieron sus negocios, pudieron estudiar y pudieron tener una vida digna allá en ese país.
The crisis has come full circle. Only a few decades ago, Venezuela greeted hundreds of thousands of Colombians fleeing from their own domestic strife with open doors. Now many Colombians feel as though they are returning the favor. Once an accountant, this Colombian returnee has taken to weaving bags, sending back money when he can to his wife and son who are still in Venezuela.
Pero creemos nosotros, en la medida de nuestras posibilidades, que llegamos aquí para demostrarle a muchas personas.
For him, there is little distinction between borders, as he calls both countries home. Like others, his search for safety is also one for dignity, where he can offer a skill set and participate in a community he helped build. But like many others, this comes at enormous personal cost. He meets his wife twice a year at a border crossing, only long enough to give her a quick wave. Until he can find a sustainable way to bring his family over, this brief lover's greeting at the nearby crossing is as close as he will come. Meanwhile, Colombian returnees, local Colombians, and Venezuelan refugees work here side by side to show that for now, life must move forward. Across Colombia and beyond, the complex mix of returnees, locals, and Venezuelan refugees is a stark reminder that even in the age of information, the past is doomed to repeat itself if others choose to do nothing with what they see. Some look straight past the mirror. The solidarity shown by countries in the region is under immense pressure, and without more direct engagement by the international community, this crisis will continue to unravel, with millions more Venezuelans expected to flee without any assurance of what lies on the other side. UNHCR is on the front lines, partnering with local authorities across all categories, from providing basic supplies to promoting community initiatives that help Venezuelans gain a chance at self-reliance. But there has never been more of a time of urgent need. With borders around the world now closing up, the Venezuelan crisis is being pushed into the shadows. That's millions of hungry, hopeful families and loved ones displaced, with less access to humanitarian aid than almost any war-torn area on Earth. Only by reimagining these borders as starting points, rather than finish lines, can we truly reach those in most need. Now, more than ever, we must be defined not by our borders, but by our bonds. While the most vulnerable are at the largest number in history, it has never been more easy to make an act of kindness universal.
Que el mundo debe alzar su voz y decir basta.